All right, everybody, what's going on? This your girl Tiffany coming through live in effect, and I'm here, right here on the StreamYard. So make sure you subscribe to that channel on YouTube if you haven't, or you can share this video. Also, you can share this video on Facebook as well. So today, I'm gonna be dealing with a topic that doesn't get talked about very often. A pretty fun, interesting topic, and that topic would deal with Afrofuturism. So that's what I want to deal with. So I am a person that loves comic books. I like Marvel, DC, all that good stuff. But also I have come across to liking Afrofuturism as well. That's just one of the things that has sparked my interest. And not only it has sparked my interest, it has made me more, it gives you more creativity and ideas. So to break down the origins of the comic books, when you read comic books, right, you reading about superheroes, but superheroes carry these different powers, right? These like metaphysical type of powers, so to speak. Okay. Deal with like quantum mysticism. Now, as we all know that quantum mysticism is considered to be pseudo, but it's a form of philosophy, a form of metaphysics as well. So all the stuff that you hear about people, superhumans and transhumanism and so many other subjects, yeah, that explains the superhero, the mutants, and all that good stuff in that concept. So you're gonna see a lot of quantum physics. You're gonna notice there's a lot of quantum physics and quantum mysticism that's being used to describe the stories about these characters. So they have human attributes. They live lives as human beings, do things that humans normally do, but they carry some type of special power that's beyond the human nature. So they're like immoral beings that's operating as humans. So they go through everyday human life and experience their life as what normal humans deal with, right? But they also carry a special part of them that makes them different from other humans. So that's what these black superheroes and comic books really be about, right? So the author is using their imagination, right, to picture all the events that's going on in the world, historical events, right? They use it into trying to create a superhero that can come and save the day, or that can come and, the decrease amount of problem that's taking place or whatnot. So like Superman was the character Superman, his story came from a Jewish guy. So a Jewish guy wrote the story about Superman because of what the Jewish people had to deal with during the time of the Holocaust. So it inspired him to write a story about somebody coming to save the day, right? Somebody with the superpower. So, and Superman's weakness is the kryptonite, right? So, I mean, a lot of these stories are very interesting, and they tell a lot of stories, especially when we talk about Afrofuturism. It tells a lot of story dealing with the African culture that's combined with science fiction. So I just want to give y'all a brief outline of what it is. So what I'm about to do is go ahead and get started. All right, I'm gonna get started on the definition of what Afrofuturism is, and then I can show you some sources where you can look up some more information about it. Then I could play some video or a video, but I'm gonna go ahead and get started. All right, so here's my screen if you can see it. Okay, so the introduction is Afrofuturism. Now, Afrofuturism is a cultural, aesthetic philosophy of science and philosophy of history that explores the developing intersection of African diaspora culture with technology. It was coined by Mark Derry in 1993 and explored in the late 1990s through conversation by Alondra Nelson. Afrofuturism addresses themes and concerns for the African diaspora through technoculture and science fiction. encompassing a range of media and artists with a shared interest in envisioning Black futures that stem from Afro-diasporic experiences. Seminal Afrofuturistic works include the novels of Samuel R. Delany, Octavia Butler, the canvases of Jean Mitchell Baptiste, or Bisquois, my bad, Jean Mitchell Bisquois, and Angel Bert Maltier, and the photograph of Renee Cox, the explicitly extraterrestrial method of was it Parliament and Funkadelic, the Jazon Crew, Warp 9, Deltron 3030, Cool Keith, Sun Ra, and the Marvel Comics superhero Black Panther. All right. So the term Afrofuturism came about in 1993. Okay. Now, again, Afrofuturism did not earn its popularity until the movie Black Panther came out. All right. And a form of Afrofuturism, if you guys don't know, there was a comic book called Milestone Comics, which is now bought by DC comic books. They have taken over the company. But beforehand, Milestone Comics book was dealing with a lot of Afrofuturism, dealing with a lot of Black superheroes and whatnot. And then I have one comic book called The Brother Man. I forgot the name of the author, but Brother Man is also dealing with a form of Afrofuturism itself as well. I have some comic books and whatnot. So The Brother Man started in the early 90s in Philadelphia. Okay. So yeah. So yeah, those are example of Afrofuturism. But I'm gonna go ahead and continue on. Now, down here where the history, it says mid to late 20th century development. What would later be called an Afrofuturistic approach to music was first propounded by Sun Ra. Born in Alabama, Sun Ra's music coalesced in Chicago in the mid 1950s when with the orchestra he began recording music that drew from hard bop sources, creating a new synthesis that used Afrocentric and space-themed titles to reflect Ra's linkage of ancient African culture, specifically Egypt, and the cutting edge of the space age. For many years, Ra and his bandmates lived, worked, and performed in Philadelphia while touring festivals worldwide. Ra's film Space is the Place shows the orchestra in Oakland in the mid-1970s in full space regular repellent with science fiction imagery as well as other comedic and musical material. As of 2018, the band was still composing and performing under the leadership of Marshall Allen. Afrofuturism was a label also retroactively applied to George Clinton and his band Parliament and Funkadelic with his magnum opus Mothership's Connection and the subsequent The Clones of Dr. Funkenstein, P-Funk, Earth Tour, Funkatelli versus the Placebo Syndrome, and Motor Booty Affair. In 1975, Japanese artist Tadanori Yoku used elements of science fiction along with Eastern subterranean myths to depict an advanced civilization in his design of the cover art for African American jazz musician Miles Davis' live album Agrata. Other musicians typically regarded as working in or greatly influenced by the Afrofuturistic tradition include reggae producer Lee Scratch Perry and scientist hip hop artist Africa Bambaataa and Tricky, electronic musician Larry Heard, a guy called Gerald, Juan Atkins, Jeff Mills, Nucleus, Lodi Golden, and Richard Shore, writers of Light Years Away, described as a cornerstone of early 80s beatbox Afrofuturism. Now, that's interesting. So let's look down here where it says cultural criticism in the 1990s. In the early 1990s, Mark Derry, in his 1994 essay, Black to the Future, began to write about the features he saw as common in African American science fiction. Derry dubbed this phenomenon Afrofuturism. Afrofuturistic art has been written about by scholars like Alondra Nelson, Greg Tate, Trisha Rose, Kudwo Ishan, and others. In an interview, Alondra Nelson explained Afrofuturism as a way of looking at the subject position of Black people, which covers themes of alienation, aspiration for a utopic future. The idea of alien or other is a thing often explored. Additionally, Nelson says that discussions around race, access, and technology often bluster uncritical claims about so-called digital divide. Nelson is of the opinion that the digital divide overemphasizes the association of racial and economic inequality with limited access to technology, and that this association then begins to construct Blackness as always oppositional to technology-driven chronicles of progress. All right. So then it goes on to talk about the celebrities, Janelle Monáe, Missy Elliott, Erykah Badu, whatnot. Okay. All right, so let's skip on down to like the literature. All right, so it says the creation of the term Afrofuturism in the 1990s was often primarily used to categorize speculative fiction that treats African American themes and addresses African American concern in the context of the 20th century technoculture, but was soon expanded to include artistic, scientific, and spiritual practices throughout the African diaspora. Contemporary practices radioactively identifies and documents historical instances of Afrofuturistic practices and integrates them into the canon. For example, the Dark Matter anthologies edited by Cherie Thomas feature contemporary Black science fiction, discuss Ralph Ellison' Invisible Man in her introduction, looking for the invisible, and also include older works by W.E.B. Du Bois, Charles W. Chestnut, and George S. Schuyler. All right, so that's a little information right there. All right, so this here is a picture of Afrofuturism. This is what the painting looks like right here. Very unique. All right, so that's enough right here. If you want to look at more references on this, let's see. There's the references at the bottom of the page. All right. And here's some sources right here. Afrofuturism, Science Fiction, and History of the Future. Okay. By Lisa Yazek. That was written in 2006. So here's information if you want to look that up for yourself. Okay. All right, so here's the book called Afrofuturism, The World of Black Sci-Fi and Fantasy Culture. Yatasha L. Womack. All right, this was written in 2013. And let's look at the table of contents. All right, so right here it says Evolution of Space Cadet, a human fairy tale named Black, Project Imagination, Mothership in Key on Mars, African Cosmo for Modern Mermaids, divine feminine in space, pen my future, moonwalkers in paint and pastel, a clock for a time traveler, the surreal life, agent change, and future world. All right, so let's look at the introduction. Okay. Okay, well, that's not much with the intro. All right, so here it is. All right, so right here, it says, it's one thing when black people aren't discussed in world history. Fortunately, teams of dedicated historians and culture advocates have chipped away from the propaganda often functioning as history for world's students to eradicate that glaring error. But when even in the imaginary future, a space where the mind can stretch beyond the Milky Way to envision routine space travel, cuddly space animals, talking apes, and time machines, people can't fathom a person of non-Euro descent 100 years into future. A cosmic foot has to be put down. All right. And it was an old age joke that blacks in sci-fi movies from the 50s through the 90s typically had a door of faith. The black man who saved the day in the original Night of the Living Dead was killed by trigger happy cops. The black man who landed with was it Charlton Heston in the original Planet of the Apes was quickly captured and stuffed in a museum. A overeager black scientist nearly triggered the end of the world in Terminator 2. On occasion, the black character in such film popped up as the silent, mystical type, or maybe a scary witch doctor, but it was fairly clear that in the artistic rendering of the future by pop culture standards, people of color weren't factors at all. But then it goes on, it says, but then came the smash box office success of The Matrix and Avatar. Both movies spoke to re-envision of the future that weaved mysticism, explored the limits of technology, and advocated for self-expression and peace. The Matrix included a cast of multi-ethnic characters, the polar opposite of the legacy of homogeneous sci-fi depictions, so great that even film critic Robert Ebert questioned whether the Matrix creators envisioned a future world dominated by black people. Then Denzel Washington played humanity's savior in the Hughes brother proto apocalyptic film, The Book of Eli. Wesley Snipes' heroic Blade trilogy inspired a new tire of black vampire heroes, not to mention a Coldplay craze in which countless men donned the Blade costume. So, and then it goes on to talk about what is Afrofuturism, and it's pretty much so it's broken down in different sessions. The rise of the black geek. Then you got cosplay rules, the dawn of a new era, a cyber movement is born. So yeah. So this is a book about Afrofuturism. You can go ahead and check it out yourself. The world of black sci-fi and fantasy culture. Okay. And it's written by Itasha L. Womack. All right. So then you got another one here deal with super black American pop culture and black superheroes, which was written in 2001. 2011. Okay. So here it is, the introduction, the chapters. Okay, let me go back. Chapter 1. All right. So let's go to chapter 1. It says, color them black. Oh, we can beat them forever and ever. Then we could be heroes just for one day. Dave Bowie heroes. Ain't no such thing as Superman. Gil Scott Heron. The first minute of a new day. All right. So, okay. So right here, it says, score of readers have used superhero comics to vicariously defy gravity and bound over skyscrapers, swing through the Big Apple with the greatest of ease, stalk the dark streets of Gotham, or travel at magnificent speeds throughout the universe on an opaque surfboard. Yet superheroes are more than fuel for fantasies or a means to escape from the humdrum world of everyday responsibility. Superheroes symbolize societal attitudes regarding good and evil, right and wrong, altruism and greed, justice and fair play. Lost, however, in the grand ethos and pathos that superheroes represent are the black superhero that fly, fight, live, love, sometimes die. In contrast, even the most absurd white superheroes are granted an opportunity to make their way from the narrow margins of fandom to mainstream media exposure. Nevertheless, what black superhero may lack in mainstream popularity, they more than match in symbolism, meaning and political import with regard to the cultural politics of race in America. Even though omission and chronic marginalization of black superheroes are phenomena rife with cultural and socio-political implication. Right? So that's the first paragraph of chapter 1. All right. And that's coming from this book called Super Black American Pop Culture and Black Superheroes. So it's written by Adi Lifu Nama. Adi Lifu Nama is the author. All right, so you can look this up yourself if you want to. You can just find it online. And then here's one by Octavia Butler, The Parable of the Shore. The odyssey of one woman who is twice as feeling in a world that has become doubly dehumanized. The time is 2025. The place is California, where small walled communities must protect themselves from desperate hordes of scavengers and roaming bands of drug addicts. When one such community is overrun, Lauren Olamina, an 18-year-old black woman, sets off on foot, moving north along the dangerous coastal highways. Lauren is a sharer, one who suffers from hyper empathy, the ability to feel others' pain as well as her own. All right. So, this is another black science fiction author. Her name was Octavia Butler. She was very prominent in the time period in around the 90s, I believe, or the late 80s. She did a lot of science fiction work. Yeah, she wrote a lot of stories. So this is one of her work right here, which is called The Parable of the Shore. So if you want to look it up, you can go ahead and look that up yourself as well. All right. So I'm not going to read all that, but I just want to show you guys. Okay. All right. So, yeah, that's that information. So I want to show you guys a video from TED Talks. It's about Afrofuturism. The guy name is Tim Fielder. He's one of the black artists, a black author that's involved in Afrofuturism. So he's going to give the concept. He's going to talk about the outline. He's going to talk about everything that's dealing with the subject matter. So I just want to show you guys that real fast. The video is about 16 minutes long, but I'm not going to play all of it. I'm gonna play some of it. All right.
Manifesting in the age of Afrofuturism, the diesel funk way. First rule, everybody is good at something. Everybody is good at something. Everybody is good at something. I can draw anything. I'm pretty good at it. I've been doing it since I was 2 years old. I can draw any environment, any vehicle, any prop. I've made my living from it. It's one of the things I can do. It's what I'm good at. So what I want you to keep in mind is that I'm good at this. Find out what you're good at. And if you look at what I'm doing here, most of what I'm doing is involved with science fiction, speculative fiction, things like that, comics. I'm a comic book artist, and I'm good at it. The thing that is most important is the word manifesting. Manifesting motion, manifesting still images, manifesting anything that can move what's in your mind forward. That's what it's about. It's about willing to change and alter how you look at the world, look at the environment, and move forward with that. In my particular case, I started out in Afrofuturism. Now, you might ask, well, what is Afrofuturism? I've heard of futurism, but what is Afrofuturism? Well, futurism is where you take ideas, social mores, language, culture, and you look at it in a forward-thinking manner. That's called futurism. Afrofuturism is where you take Afrocentric concepts and you fuse that with futurism. So you have Afrofuturism. So what do you do with that? What does that mean, Afrofuturism? Well, I'm a little grown up a little bit in age here. And, my introduction to Afrofuturism was Lieutenant Uhura, Star Trek. Gene Roddenberry created this fantastic character. Nichelle Nichols is this amazing actress. She took the role. She almost quit the role, actually. And Reverend King convinced her to stay with the part. So that was my first introduction, because prior to that, there were no black people in outer space. Second introduction, Lando Calrissian. Now, Lando, yes, it's true. Lando was the only black person in the galaxy. He was. It's true. It's true. But somehow, Lando was able to make his way and destroy a second Death Star, by the way. He did pretty good with that. So these were my introductions to science fiction, to speculative fiction, to seeing people who look like me, like my children, how they would exist in a science fiction and a fantasy environment. So I'm good at drawing black people in spaceships. That's what I'm good at. I'm sorry, I had to put it that way, but it's true. It's what I do. Okay? Now, we're going to move on here. Now, I've been doing it for a long time. I've designed these things for film, all kinds of costuming. It's what I do. Act one. Yes, I know. Chitlins, Comics, and Cotton Fields, may the force be with y'all. I was born in Tupelo, Mississippi, home of Elvis. Raised in Clarksdale, Mississippi, home of Robert Johnson. Now, this is the center of the Delta. So I grew up across the street from a cotton field. My grandparents from Tupelo, all entrepreneurs, brick masons, artisans with their hands. That's what they did. They were all entrepreneurs. My other grandfather was a barber. These people knew a trade. That's how they made their living. That's how they raised their children. And their children would then go on, my parents, AJ and Rowena, also entrepreneurs. but they were also teachers. They were instructors for 45 years. These folks did it. So I grew up in Mississippi, had a great upbringing. My brothers, two older brothers, twin brothers. So if you see someone who looks like me, it's not me, it's him. And we grew up around DC Comics, reading Marvel comics. Would eventually go on to read Heavy Metal magazine. But you know, when you read these things, the people in those comics really don't look like you. You know, they look like, you know, the big white guy with the muscles, and, you know, he flew away. That's what happened. So this is what I was raised up on in comics and most speculative fiction. That would go on. You know, occasionally you could diversify a little bit and have a woman, but hey, let's be frank. You know, it got a little ridiculous with that. A woman is well endowed, over-sexualized images in the way women were depicted. So these things were not really useful and expansive to most folks. And again, myself and people like me, we didn't see ourselves in that material. You know, we wanted to be the one that would fly off the roof with the expanding cape, right? We wanted to be the ones who would be able to show, you know, we're the Dark Knight. We wanted to have that opportunity too. So I went to New York. And when I went to New York, I decided to become more aggressive in terms of doing Afrofuturism. And I created a concept called Black Metropolis. Black Metropolis is where I would take elements of Santeria, Vodun, and I would merge those concepts with speculative fiction. So I would take everything fully painted to really make it hyper-real, make it heroic, but to bring it out into the world so that people could see people like me. I mean, more muscular, obviously, but see people like me doing these heroic things. That's what I wanted to do. Also with fusing music, things like that. Blending musical ideas, taking speculative ideas, fusing them with form. Somewhat involved with hip hop culture. These things, you know, some people listen to rap, some people don't, but it's there, so we have to fuse those things into our work as well. So I did that for many years. But of course, as you're trying to make your living doing this during the 1990s, you have to manifest. You have to change the way. And in my particular case, I began to chase the shiny object. Chasing the shiny object meant trying to get work in the established system, because at that time, it was difficult to get work doing Black characters, action adventure, right? Because up to that point, there were, beyond Lando Calrissian and Lieutenant Uhura, you would see other Black characters, but you remember Return of the Jedi? There was this X-Wing pilot. Well, what happened to him? It didn't work out that well for him. He got blown up. He was on the screen for about 10 seconds, right? So that didn't bode well. And then we had this guy here. Remember this guy? Remember Alien? Yaphet Kotto. He was great. He was a great actor, a great character. He was smart. He was one of the most intelligent crew members. Didn't work out too well for him either. You know, that chest burster thing was really not good for him, right? So I began to get work. I worked around for Marvel Comics and places like that. And I began to get this work because I had children, I had a family, and I still wanted to remain being an artist, but it was difficult to create in that environment. And the world, as you're manifesting, sometimes is not in the same place you are. So you have to show patience when you're manifesting. I had to manifest. So finally, we came down to what I call the Diesel Funk way. Now, the Diesel Funk way means willing what you want, being aware of your environment and willing what you want through that environment. So I created a concept called Maddie's Rocket. Now, Maddie's Rocket is based loosely on the life of a pilot. Her name is Bessie Coleman. She actually lived during the Harlem Renaissance, and she was the first internationally licensed African-American pilot. She couldn't get a license in the United States, so she's from Texas. She saved her money. She went to France to get her license. It's quite incredible. She was doing that when it wasn't safe to do it. So I took elements of her life, I took elements of Harriet Tubman's life, fused them together, and named them after my great grandmother, whose name was Maddie. Now, why did I do that? Afrofuturism, in this particular case, I call it retro Afrofuturism. It's true. So what I did was I took all those things I love, Buck Rogers, Flash Gordon, and I brought them together. And I always tell folks, well, Maddie's Rocket is like Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon, those serials from the 1930s, only with Lena Horne in the main role. That's what I did. So I did all of these things. And initially, because, I love motion, I began to do it as digital animation. So I designed everything. I wanted it to be like a movie. I wanted it to be powerful. So I went through that, and I created multiple episodes of Maddie doing her thing. But, let's be frank. Animation is hard. It's really laborious. So for every frame you see, there's like a billion other frames you have to draw. And it's cool. I love it, but it's incredibly hard work. So I would keep going because I'm not afraid of hard work. And I had some very good friends who sat me down, and they told me, you got to change the way. So I had to manifest again. There's a filmmaker by the name of Alejandro Jodorowsky. He's a great filmmaker, and he's in this documentary called Jodorowsky's Dune. I show it in my classes. And he said, sometimes to hear no does not mean no. It means to change the way. So that's what I did. I knew I had to change the way. And that's when I created Diesel Funk Studios. Now, I created Diesel Funk Studios for a reason. I wanted to have a clearinghouse for my ideas. I didn't want to hear no. I didn't want to hear, oh, this is too much. Oh, this is not good enough. I wanted to be able to do it my way and send my vision of Afrofuturism out into the world. So what did I do? I didn't stop doing Maddie's Rocket. I simply changed the way. So I went back to my first love. I changed Maddie's Rocket into a comic book. And I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, in the last year and a half, I have never been this busy in my life. It is ridiculous. I've been all over the country, sleeping in interesting hotel rooms, moving all over the country, paneling in different events. So sometimes you hear that statement where a person is close to their goal and they stop. It doesn't mean you should stop. It means you should change your angle, change your perspective on it a little bit. And that's what I did. And by moving my perception just a little bit, I opened myself up to opportunity. I began to say yes. I began to manifest what is most important. And while I did that in the comic book, and I'm very proud of what I've done, I began to also take my teaching and to give back. Here's a bit of irony for you. Young Lights Comics, hey, I do selfies wherever I go. And these are 25 African-American young girls in Clarksdale, Mississippi, where I was raised. Just this past summer, I was actually brought to Clarksdale to teach these young African-American girls how to do comics. It's incredible what we did. This is my favorite, fashionista squad. It's pretty interesting. Hey, I guess they went around defending fashion. I love working with these girls. It was fun working with Delta State and all these different types of things out there. It was fun. The irony is that I was teaching kids how to do something that I was made fun of doing when I was a young boy. It's amazing how, remember, the world catches up with you. You stick to your goal. You shift your perspective. That's what you do. That went great. So I've been teaching Afrofuturism, comics, comic book workshops all over the country. It's been a lot of fun, exhausting, but fun. Been doing it. One of the greatest things was being involved with the Mississippi Book Festival. That was a lot of fun. Most recently, I just adapted a comic book story by the father of Black science fiction, Samuel R. Delany. That was an amazing experience. Doing an interview and then doing a comic. That's moving it forward, passing it forward. To make it even crazier, I started something called Afrofuture Fest. I'm an Afrofuturist, so I decided to start Afrofuture Fest. And it was the first branded booth in New York City Comic Con history. And that was pretty amazing because what we did was we created a safe space for cartoonists and creators and writers of color to create and showcase and vend their work in a large corporate environment. We want to move things forward. We want to move people forward. That's what it was about. We're lifting off. Very important. Now, I'm going to say this last thing because it's not just about Afrofuturism, it's about any futurism. It's about anyone from any part of our culture moving themselves forward. You have to visualize what you want. This is the hard part.
All right. So that was one of the authors of Afrofuturism, sharing his story and his experience. Um, as he mentioned, he was saying that I know he mentioned somewhere where it was not very easy for a black author to like get into the mainstream of comic books. They had a hard time. So that's one of the reasons why a milestone was created. So real quick, I want to show y'all what milestone is for those of you that don't know. Okay, let me show you guys real quick. All right. So I'm gonna show you a brief documentary of milestone. Mm. As y'all know, the founder, one of the founders, had passed away. So the documentary was dedicated to him. So I'm just gonna play a little bit of it.
We were four artists who wanted to have more control over the kind of comics that we were making. So we created a business structure to protect our artistic intent. Uh, a lot of things have been laid on top of Milestone, that it was comics for Black people, that it was an attempt by the man to hold down the burgeoning Black comic movement, which doesn't seem to have really gone anywhere since Milestone left. If we were holding them down, we did a really good job because we're now holding them down without existing. But basically, it was a bunch of guys who like comics, who had had a certain level of success in the mainstream and wanted to take some of that and kind of make our own projects. I mean, we still enjoyed working on mainstream Marvel and DC comics, but we wanted to make our own thing and control it and have total say over it. What I will say is what Milestone got out of the deal was distribution pretty much unmatched by any other Black company ever. We did somewhere between 250 and 300 comics, which is probably equal to the output of every other Black publisher combined. We sold a lot more comics than anybody else, just from the weight of being in the stores every week. We maintained total creative control. The deal that we had with DC, and DC completely stood by it, was they had the option to not publish. They didn't have the option to change anything. We published a lot of stuff that made them very uncomfortable, which always sort of amused me because they weren't as uncomfortable when they dealt with those topics. But they were dealing with those topics from their point of view and from a perspective that they were comfortable with. We were dealing with it from several different perspectives that they had never heard before, and it made them nervous, and they didn't want to be the guys publishing the book that was wrong somehow, and they didn't understand it, so they were extra jumpy. But they lived up to it.
Milestone was a great inevitable next step, that you would have enough successful writers and artists in the comic book business that they could put together a collective and publish their own line of characters. And they were a super talented group. Dwayne McDuffie and Dennis Cowan are fantastic storytellers. And the characters they've created will have great longevity. I know they're not being published now, but that doesn't matter. Those characters are great, and those characters are for all time. And when you look at the success of Static Shock, when it got turned into an animated series, that animated series was gigantically successful. And it was successful without having a toy line or any licensing support. It got, it wasn't a Disney property. It wasn't a Nickelodeon property, yet it had this huge audience. So I look at that as like, wow, that's enormously successful, and that will be successful again in some other medium. I look at...
All right. Oh, okay. So that's Milestones. That's a brief history behind it. So again, the founder, the guy that was talking in the beginning, he had passed away in 2011. So I think he had died from a heart attack. But anyways, yeah. So he was talking about the history of Milestone and what inspired him to do so. So they were also working under the Marvel and DC comics at one point in time, but then they decided to branch off and start their own thing. So, all right, now, real quick, I want to show y'all something. Some years back, I think it was about 5 years ago, I have been to some of the Afrofuturism convention they had. I've actually been to like maybe 3 of them. It was great. It's so many authors, very gifted writers, gifted people who was great at their artistic drawing, things of that nature. I actually had a pleasure to go. I really did. So I've got a couple of books. Now, one of these books right here, this is called The Lost Tribes, which is written by C. Taylor Butler. Okay, it was an African-American woman. She wrote this book right here. It's an Afrofuturism book. And so I'm going to kind of like, let's see. Like, if you see in this book, it has some of the Meta Nature writing in here. And but it also deals with other African cultures and a lot of sci-fi things in here. So I haven't even got a chance to actually read this book, but I am going to do so. I want to do that because I want to get back into the habit of doing Afrofuturism, But yep, and then she always have a quote in here. So like chapter 1 has a quote: "When my cats aren't happy, I'm not happy, not because I care about their mood, but because I know they're just sitting there thinking of ways to get even." Parsi Shelley. And the first chapter is Ben. So yeah, this book is very interesting. You can find it online if you need it the ISBN number, I can give you that if you want the ISBN number so you can look it up for yourself. But yeah, this book costs about $10.95. All right. So this is one book. Then I have another book which is very interesting, which I really like. I really like this book a lot. It's dealing with zodiac signs. So everybody like to play around with zodiac signs, right? So imagine those zodiac signs become superheroes, mutants. That's what this book is about. It's called Zodiac Book of Aries. Okay. So this was written by G. Russell Gaynor. A very cool book. So it was dealing with Aries, who's like the leader, so to speak, and all his other comrades come from different zodiac signs. So they operate like mutants, and the concept is based off of Afrofuturism in itself. So one of the good book. I think this book was published. Yeah, this book was published in 2008. In 2008. But it's science fiction. And you'll be surprised to find out there's a lot of quantum mysticism, metaphysical concept in this book, all that good stuff. So, yep. And if you want the ISBN number, you can contact me as well, and I can give you the ISBN number if you want it for this book. All right. Let me see. I don't know how much it is for this. I think this book had cost like, I want to say this book had cost around $25. I think I could be wrong about it. But anyways. Anyhow, if you want the ISBN number, I will give it to you. Just reach out to me for it. All right. Zodiac Books of Aries. Okay. So anyways, that's all for today. I just wanted to do the topic about Afrofuturism. I hope you guys enjoyed that topic. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. And I thank you all for watching. So if you want to share this video, you're more than welcome to do so. Please do that. If you have not subscribed to my YouTube channel, please make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you share this video on your platform or whatever. And hit the notification bell whenever I come on. All right, so this is your girl, Tiffany French. I am getting ready to log off, and I hope you all have a productive day. Please be safe and stay powerful. All right, and that's it. Deuces. All right, then. Thank you.